a few months ago, I was talking with a male colleague, somebody I've worked with for a long time and wonderful guy. And I was talking about something on gender and women in leadership and climate roles and some of the challenges. And he's like, "Really? Are you still talking about this?" And I was like, "Well, let me give you the numbers." And then I did. And he's like, "Okay, you can keep talking about it." I'm like, "Yes, I'm still talking about it."
Hello, and welcome to the Scientista podcast, where women in science rule. This podcast is all about supporting powerful women who lead with their brains. I'm behavioral scientist Dr. Shata Chakraborty.
And I'm former Assistant Secretary of State Monica Medina. The Scientista podcast brings you conversations with leaders, changemakers, and cultural figures, sharing how they turn facts and evidence into real-world impact. So let's dive in.
Yes, we are so excited to have with us virtually today because she's West Coast, but originally DC based, and we hope to have her back soon, Helen Mountford. She's currently the president and CEO of the Climate Works Foundation, which is a global platform for philanthropy all about innovating and supporting the scaling of high impact climate solutions that really benefit people and the planet. She has 30 years of experience prior to this role, working with governments, think tanks, corporate, civil society, all the stakeholders, you name it. And it was in this role we first met. This is when she was at the World Resources Institute as the Vice President of Climate and Economics. So, Helen, we're so excited to have you. We know that prior to WRI, you were also at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, so you can really bring a wide spectrum of views to this conversation. And Monica and I have a lot of questions lined up, but I'm going to kick it off with our first one for you, really talking about your career and how you've spent it really driving global climate action forward, from international negotiations to championing women's leadership at the front lines of climate solutions. How did you get involved in this? I know there's stories here. What's kept you committed to tackling such a complex, global, interconnected challenge, and then also from a gender lens? Please tell us your story.
Thanks so much, Sveta, and it's delightful to be with you and Monica here today. Thank you so much for inviting me. What really drew me into this field was back in the late 1980s, and I was at university in Australia. I turned up on the first day, had to walk 20 minutes in the sun into and out of campus, and I absolutely fried my scalp through my hair.
Oh
And
my
this was
gosh.
No.
because of the ozone hole. And at that time, we had shocking levels of skin cancer in Australia. And it was the realization for me that we humans did this. We created the ozone hole. But at that time, it was also the time of the Montreal Protocol. So we knew we could also fix it. And that's what's really kept me going since on climate action, because it's really very much, very much a challenge that we can and are making progress on fixing. We know the solutions, we know how to implement it. Definitely not a linear progress. We see a lot of setbacks, and we're seeing some now, see them at different times, but we have been moving the needle. And the fact that we can, and we can come together, and with women, with men, others really championing the solutions, bringing them forward, finding ways that actually work for people, for the economy, for our society, is really what keeps me committed. Seeing those successes and those wins, even when we have pushback and misinformation, etc. That's what keeps me
Let's
going.
pick up on that point
Yeah.
about women, because here we are, all three of us women, talking about climate change. And I have to say, none of us is intimidated or shrinking back from this challenge. You know, people talk about doomerism, but women just don't give up. And I'd love to hear more about women that you've come across in your career. We know that when women lead on climate, there are better outcomes, either with respect to communities or even entire countries. And there have been scientific studies to show this. So we'd love to hear more about powerful examples of women leading in climate in particular, especially now.
There's so many examples of this, and you're absolutely right, Monica. I think one of the things we see is even in the hardest times, women tend to say, "Okay, That's where we are. We need to get on with it. You know, I think a lot of us say in this field, it's too late for pessimism. We don't have that luxury. We just need to get on with it, right? And get things done. So let me give you two examples that are really exciting ones I've seen in different countries and which are ones that we and others in philanthropy have supported. One comes really from India, where some of those of us who are supporting adaptation and resilience have helped to fund this amazing gender focused innovative approach to protecting the women who are most exposed to heat impacts in India. So this is work that's led by the Self-Employed Women's Association, the SIWA in India, with support from Climate Resilience for All, which is actually a gender-focused climate adaptation nonprofit, and working together with a global and a local insurance companies. And together they were looking at how could they help protect the women, these self-employed women who are those out on the streets each day selling fruits and vegetables, selling different wares, who are those on the trash dumps, picking up trash and recycling things. So how could they protect them when there are these incredible heat waves? And what they did was develop this new insurance mechanism that really basically delivers insurance, delivers funding into the bank accounts, into the phones of these women whenever there is a massive heat wave coming. They don't need to do any claims. It just automatically delivers the
Wow.
insurance, which covers their wages for the day, so they don't have to go out and work and expose their health, their lives, and they can still cover the urgent things they need to cover, like food, education, supporting their families. So they can still do that even while they are actually able to protect themselves at home. In the recent heat waves this spring in India, they managed to reach over 225,000 self-employed women
Wow.
across 6 states. And so now they're looking at how do we take this to other countries, to other groups of women. And this really has been all of this has been women-led, fabulous women leaders in SIWA, the Self-Employed Women's Association, in Climate Resilience for All, in the insurance companies, and really delivered a solution that works for the communities and for the women.
That's such a great tangible example. And shout out to Kathy at Climate Resilience for All. I also nominated them for the Earthshot Prize this year. So that,
Excellent.
that list is coming out soon of the
Amazing.
finalists. Yeah.
Well, and I love that they've managed to reach women where they are in their cell phones, right? Not everyone has a bank account in these countries, but to be able to reach them and pay them through cell phone networks, amazing.
Yeah. No, it's so important. It's really designed for what those women need when they need it exactly, rather than having to go through lengthy claims or processes. It's a really fantastic scheme. If I could I tell you about another one that really excites me that actually
Please.
comes
We
from
could listen to these
Indonesia?
stories all
We
day.
really could. This is
This
what Scientist is all about.
This is another great one, and it comes from Indonesia this time, and has, again, this global impact potential. So there's an architecture professor, Beta Paramita, and she's really on a mission in Indonesia to help cool the people, the buildings, the cities of Indonesia with a very simple but very effective climate-friendly solution. It's cool white roofs. And so she was successful in this global cooling prize, the Million Cool Roofs Challenge that we and others funded a number of years ago. She was successful in winning that prize with her women-led team in Indonesia. And what they do is on a really hot day, we know that a black roof in Indonesia can reach over 150 degrees Fahrenheit or 66 degrees Celsius, and that's radiating heat into the structures below as well as the surrounding areas. And so by applying this specially designed solar reflective coating to the building's roof, they're able to have it absorb less of the sun's radiation and reduce the internal temperature in those buildings and rooms by multiple
Amazing
degrees.
too.
I mean, this really has been so essential for helping people where they're at in homes, in industries, in manufacturing, etc. Not just helping them in terms of their comfort levels, but can also be life-saving as we see some of these heat effects. So in a country like Indonesia, this also is really important in terms of reducing emissions, since most of electricity at the moment comes from coal-fired power plants. So really can help to reduce emissions by doing this kind of intervention. So Beta and her team won this Million Cool Roofs Challenge. And with that, they've expanded the use of these cool roofs across 15 different cities in Indonesia, with an estimated 10,000 people benefiting. And now they're taking it to an even greater scale, working with some of the local authorities in different parts of Indonesia. So really exciting to see some of these innovations, women-led innovations, who are really working with communities and partners on the ground to deliver what's needed for people.
And these are these women led innovations coming from the global south. These two examples you've given are from areas that are historically not represented on the global stage proportionately to the number of people that are actually living there and can benefit from the learnings and the sharings of the solutions that are happening on the ground so they can be scaled in other environments that are similar to theirs. So these are the types of the challenges and the solutions and the women leaders that we should really being paying attention to. So I imagine, thank you for sharing these two stories. I imagine because you shared them, these are you're also hoping to elevate their voices and to share their inspiring overcoming of their challenges with audiences. Tell us more if you like, and tell us who we should be looking out for as we come up to Climate Week, New York, as we come up to the COP process. There's some women that are leading the major global convening on climate. We have the Brazilian environmental minister, Marina Silva. We have the COP executive director, Anna Tony. So there's women leading the charge. How can we elevate and bring up more women like you've just described that are really overcoming the challenges that they're experiencing locally?
Thanks, Sweta. I mean, I think this is really an important point right now. We're seeing some really big setbacks in countries like the US and some others on climate, but we're actually seeing a lot of progress and movement in many others. And the leadership we're seeing from a number of countries in the global south is really important and often overlooked. In the midst of some of these setbacks, we're not seeing this. And one of the things we're trying to do is really highlight this leadership, what's happening, and support it as we can in philanthropy, particularly some of these fantastic women who are innovating, who are taking the lead, who are moving forward. And let me just mention a few others that I think are really worth watching out for now. You
Please.
mentioned Brazil and Brazil's leadership on COP30 that's coming up later this year. It's so important, and such a critical moment and a difficult moment in terms of climate action. But you do have there, you've got Minister Marina Silva, you've got Anna Tony, who's the COP CEO, and you've got some fantastic indigenous leaders like Nara Bare and Sinea Bezerra do Valle. These are people, incredible women, who are really trying to identify some of the practical solutions and the partnerships across different groups in society that can really deliver on climate action and the implementation of our goals now in a way that benefits climate, that benefits nature, particularly with a strong focus on tropical forests, and protecting these tropical forests, the Amazon, but also others around the world, and delivering the finance that can help countries in the developing world, can help the communities to do this. So really looking for some of those solutions for tropical forests and financing, innovative different ways of combining different groups, private sector funding, sovereign wealth funds, others, not just public funding, finding ways to make progress in times that we know are hard to get public funding through international support. So really excited to see that. But a couple of others I'd love to mention. One is Vanessa Nakate, who, if you haven't seen her, she's really fabulous. She's a Ugandan climate justice activist who started a solitary strike as a youth back in 2019 in Uganda, and slowly built up a movement there with friends, with
Wow.
partners, but has
Wow.
inspired so many across Africa, different countries in Africa, and around the world. And she continues to do really fantastic work championing those solutions that really will benefit people, benefit communities, and the climate. So a real leading voice of youth activism and delivering, helping people to deliver on that activism. Another one I'd really keep watching, who just have so much admiration for, is Mia Mottley. She's the Prime Minister of Barbados, and she herself has seen the absolutely devastating effects of climate impacts on the country, on Barbados, its people, its economy, and has become a real champion for how all countries who are vulnerable to these impacts, and particularly those who are often least responsible for the changing
For
climate.
islands. Right.
Exactly, the vulnerable islands, the small island states, some of the others that really have not contributed to climate change, but actually get impacted so badly and get caught in this vicious cycle of debt distress because they get hit by a tropical storm. It's incredibly expensive to rebuild. Infrastructure is wiped out, communities are wiped out, and as they're borrowing money to rebuild the country, they get another tropical storm that hits or
Sure.
another natural disaster, and then need to go again. So she's become such an incredibly powerful voice, and working with some of the international financial institutions, other countries, to really look at how do we stop this debt distress cycle that is really spurred by and driven by climate impacts for these countries, so that they can rise up and do better, not just adapting to climate change, but actually coming out of these debt cycles. So another one I'd look for. So many more I can mention, but these are a few of the ones that I think really are worth
Amazing.
following and looking at.
Yeah, some real champions there. And I love the fact that you've, brought in some young people as well as some, people who are leading their countries and really able to speak with a loud voice as Prime Minister Motley has. She's just been amazing. Um,
She's been
I'm
fabulous. Yeah.
curious because she's really pushed hard in
Yeah.
the area of finance. She's
Yeah.
she's tried to develop insurance products. And it's interesting times now. Recently, there's been more of a call for getting rid of debt, for excusing debt from the countries that are most hard hit by climate, which is a really interesting way to think about financing solutions because it gives countries more breathing room to do that. Philanthropy is obviously also where people are looking for, filling gaps. And the US has now created a big hole in the finance for
True.
climate and for development
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious how you see philanthropy stepping up and whether there are women leaders in philanthropy who are actually like you and climate works and so many others who are thinking about this and how to bridge the financial gap now.
Um, thanks. This is a great question, and there's a number of fantastic women in climate philanthropy who I have to say are really focusing on this. Whether it's Laurence Tubiana, who's over at the European Climate Foundation, we've got Christy Ullman at Sequoia Foundation, colleagues at the Children Investment Fund Foundation, many more. I could keep listing far too many. So it's wonderful to have all these partners on this. And philanthropy does play a critical role. What we cannot do is fill the gap that's left by the public funds, as we're seeing in the US as they pull out
Yeah,
USAID,
it's a lot.
and
It's a
others.
big
It's a
gap.
lot. It's a lot. And philanthropy can't. What philanthropy can do is be catalytic and look for these solutions that really bring together different strands of capital, how they can work together, how we can move them forward in ways that are bringing public finance together with the private finance, and looking particularly at things like institutional investors who have a long-term interest and long-term investment potential, but aren't yet engaging in some of these areas or in some of the countries that need this finance. Looking at those like insurance companies, this is definitely an area where they are aware of what's happening. They are probably the most aware of any
Yeah,
sector
they're
in the
watching it like
economy. They're
hawks.
watching it. They're having to cover some of these disasters. And so how they can be even more actively engaged in moving forward solutions. So really able to bring these different approaches, innovations, which bring different types of capital together to really advance climate finance. So I think there is a lot there that climate philanthropy has already been backing, and I think an interest in doing even more of these kinds of solutions, and particularly not just with the development banks and public finance, but I think more and more looking at the private finance flows and
Yeah.
how to help guide, support, and engage them in these solutions. There's yeah, one area
There
that
can I
does. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead,
I
Helen.
I I was gonna say, and it gets back to my first points about innovation and some of the entrepreneurs and women leaders we've seen in this, and I gave a couple of examples earlier, but one of the things that's really stark to me is when you actually look at venture capital, it's only 2.3% of global venture capital that was deployed in 2024 that went to support female-only founding teams.
Right.
2.3%, less than 3%.
Yeah, that's exactly where I
Crazy,
was going. Was
crazy.
why won't banks and venture capitalists, people with money, fund women entrepreneurs? That's a question not to you, but to the world out there. It seems like such a missed opportunity.
I mean, it is such a missed opportunity, and I have to say there's so much data showing that, companies, not-for-profits, governments that are led by women do perform better. Companies with at least one woman on their board are 4 times more likely to outperform competition with only men, without the female representation. And similarly, you see statistics around countries and what they're able to do, and gender diversity and leadership in companies, 15% more likely to have financial returns above their counterparts. I mean, so we see the evidence of how diverse leadership, whether it's bringing in women, it's bringing in people of color, of different cultural contexts, this diversity is so essential in leadership to get to the solutions we need. And yet, despite that, the groups that are led by women, the entrepreneurs, the women entrepreneurs, are often not backed. And I think that is an area where philanthropy is helping and can help even more to really back these leaders, to help identify them, to help support their action. And that's something that we and others have been doing in the climate space for a while. If you look at the climate negotiations, the vast majority of the lead negotiators from countries, the vast majority, are men. And it has been stable for many, many years. It's not shifted. Monica, we've been at some of these COPs together, and we've seen that. I mean, you see that. And so one of the things we and others have been doing is working with groups who can help support, train up, encourage, coach some of the women who can then become leaders in negotiations and in climate action. Just so important.
Because, like you're saying, there's so much evidence, and closing this gender gap is going to result in better outcomes for all. Ultimately, there's science and data and evidence of that. And so it's great to hear that philanthropy, women led philanthropy, which, yes, we need to close the gap there too, is backing women led climate initiatives. But there's still a funding gap there too. I mean, this is just pervasive, regardless of what we're talking about. We just had
2%.
Kathy Yeah, we had Kathy Vidal on recently, and she was leading the United States Patent and Trademark Office and was telling us how 12%, less than 12% of patents that are given out annually in the United States are to women. So this is really pervasive across so many different sectors, across public, across private, as you've so clearly described to us. So what can we do? What needs to shift to really close this gap, and how can philanthropy step up? How do you see your role playing a part in this really complex global issue?
Is a big challenge and a big question. I mean, it is a complex global issue, and I do think at times we're seeing more progress in different countries or different sectors, and then we also face backlashes. And I think at the moment there's definitely I'm seeing some backlash against women leaders in climate spaces and NGO spaces, and some of these I'm definitely seeing that.
So
And
unfortunate.
it's so unfortunate, and it's something we need to keep being open about. We need to talk about this. We need to actually work together and challenge it when it's happening. I think the risk at times like this, when there's so many different challenges we're facing across such a broad spectrum of society, is that some of these areas that we've been making progress, whether it's on women, whether it's on people of color moving forward, addressing racism, some of these get kind of like hidden and slip behind, and we can't allow that to happen. Part of it is what I was talking about in terms of supporting the women who are stepping up and can be potential leaders to help realize their potential. Part of it is really highlighting the examples where we see women who are doing this and are doing fabulously, and emphasizing that these are women-led initiatives and what is happening there, so others can learn from that and gain that comfort and understanding of the potential. But part of it is going to be tackling some of these more systemic biases in society, and that requires all of us to work together.
I have to tell you, it is so discouraging that we're still sort of stuck. And I think this is the moment when we have to just push even harder. I've talked to some colleagues, male colleagues, who say when you start talking about women and gender and climate, their eyes are all rolling. And I'm just so disappointed in that. But we can't let it stop us from continuing to push ahead.
I agree. A few months ago, I was talking with a male colleague, somebody I've worked with for a long time, and wonderful guy. And I was talking about something on gender and women in leadership and climate roles and some of the challenges. And he's like, "Really? Are you still talking about this?" And I was like, "Well, let me give you the
What?
numbers." And then I did, and he's like, "Okay, okay, you can keep talking about it." I'm like, "Yes, I'm still talking about it.
Yes.
Still a challenge, you know?"
Well, and
So
this is
we
why
got to be firm.
Scientista is
Yeah.
here. I had this
Thank
conversation
you.
with a friend,
Thank you.
and I got this feedback, and that made me more determined to raise our voice here
Thank
on
you.
Scientista.
So, Helen, for the young scientists that are out there who are listening and who are passionate about climate, but they don't know where to start, with somebody with such a long, illustrious career as yours, what do you advise them?
Um, I have to say my career was sort of taking an opportunity here, then something interesting here, and sort of just rolled with it and developed. So one of the things I'd advise them is definitely to look for opportunities that excite you. um, don't go after jobs that you're like, this is what I should do. And sometimes we get that in mission driven areas like climate. People are like, this is what I probably should do. Go after something that excites you and interests you. That's where you're going to thrive. That's where you're going to do your best and grow, and go from there to the next, to the next. Look for those kinds of opportunities. And I think one of the things that's so important about climate is not like a small, defined, siloized sector. Climate is in everything we do and can be embedded in everything we do. So, whatever it is you're doing, you can bring climate into what you're doing, whether that's in agriculture or in industry or in education policy or whatever, finance, whatever area, you can bring that in. So, go for what excites you, what interests you, go for those things. That's where you're going to thrive, and bring climate with you into anything you do.
Love it. Nice.
Love it, love it. Well, we always end with a question about what do you do when you hit a roadblock? When, something completely unexpected knocks you back and you get sort of knocked down. How have you learned in your career to get up when you hit those roadblocks, when someone, throws you a curveball that you weren't expecting?
That's a good one. That's a great one. It's a hard one. Um, I think let me give an example from COVID. I think a lot of us hit some pretty serious curveballs in COVID. And at the time, I was at WRI, World Resources Institute, and working with just a fabulous team across so many countries on climate and sort of economic development in India and Indonesia and Mexico and Brazil. And as you might remember, in that first year of COVID in particular, and then in the second year, but the first year, there were waves of COVID hitting in different countries at different times that were
Times.
just absolutely devastating.
Devastating.
And we had so much work that was going so well in these countries on climate. We were really making progress. We're going ahead, got great funding, getting things done. And then COVID hit. And the teams there that I was working with were absolutely fabulous, but they were being hit themselves, their families, their communities were being hit. And we're still, on the hook thinking, what's going to happen to our funding? We need to do work. We need to get funding to these people. How do we do this? This challenge of this. And I remember at one stage, the lead of the team in India, who was just a fabulous woman, she turned to me and we were on a Zoom call and she's like, "So Helen, we're not really doing anything on climate these days. And I was like, oh, okay, tell me what's happening. I'm like, I'm not surprised. There's a lot to worry about and things to do. And she's like, no, that's true. We're doing, we've got a lot going on with family and community. But she's like, even more than that, because we're on the front lines and have done organization around climate, we understand how to organize people and we know how to get things to happen. So we and a bunch of other climate leads here in India have set up these systems to connect people with what they need for COVID at the moment as this wave hits us. So we're like getting oximeters to somebody, like connecting people through WhatsApp on that, on hospital beds, who needs one where in the cities we're living in. So this whole sort of community organic resource to help people in the moment. And she's like, and that's what me and my team need to spend our time on now. Anyway,
Sure.
so I was like, okay. And I was like, it took a moment and a beat. And I was like, what's this going to do on our funding and our work? And then I was like, no, this is the most important thing they can do now. And that's kind of, then had to go back and talk to the funders. And one of the things that really excited me about Climate Works Foundation, where I now am, is they were the first to turn around to us and say, we know this time incredibly impossible and so hard. And if you need delays, extensions, more funding, just let us know. And I was like, wow, thank
Amazing.
you. But it was for me also just this realization that all of these crises are interconnected and all of this is about people and taking care of our people, our communities, making sure that what we do is going to be good for people. And at times you need to do a 180 pivot, total reversal, change
Sure.
something else, and that's okay.
And
Um,
supporting women and getting them into leadership roles and giving them the tools they need to be successful. I mean, it sounds like you, it's really, you're supporting all of that,
yeah,
Helen. It's amazing.
yeah. And there
It
I
is
have to say, our
amazing.
teams were already there and doing it. They were just like, by the way, we should maybe tell you. And I was like, great, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, it's so wonderful to catch up with you again, Helen, and see how successful you are running this organization, this fantastic organization. I have to say, I miss you in the neighborhood for our listeners and our audience. Helen and I were neighbors, and we would walk our dogs at the
Dog
same
walks
time.
during COVID and other times.
And I knew her for years as Helen down the street with this beautiful dog, and now, and then only in I forget which cop we were at, and there's so many people, and I ran into you.
It was
It's
with
like,
Harrison
oh my
Ford.
gosh, where's your dog?
You really did
That
the
was
DC
that
thing and
was
didn't talk
Spain.
about work, huh?
Yeah,
No, it was
we totally
great.
did.
It was great, and I really hope your family's doing well, and it's so nice to see you, and thank you for all you do. Thank you for all you're doing
And
for
you
women.
too.
Thank you for all the Climate Works is doing, and we're just really thrilled that you were able to join us today.
No,
And
thank you
if
so
you
much for both your leadership and what you're doing with Scientista. This is so exciting and so needed. Thank you.
You're so kind. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Scientista podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, help others discover it by leaving us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and tell your friends about it. Share us. We really appreciate your support.
And remember, you can always find us at scientista.world for more stories, updates, and ways to get involved.